I know. I'm here. I'm kind of an awkward soul. Um, I just kind of wanted to give a general introduction to what the commercial truck driving industry is like, and kind of what to expect out there. My realm of experience is mostly working in rural areas and working very specifically in the Northeast in New York City. I am very capable of actually doing over-the-road truck driving, but I tend to stay in shorter distances and run for higher pay in basically more stressful environments. Um, a big thing to note that as you come out of the actual truck driving schools, a lot of very basic fundamental things are not really taught to you. How to dock, how to park, how to really navigate. A lot of truck driving schools, even the good ones, have a very limited test range. Um, they are, and some of them are in actual urban environments, so you get a little bit of um, experience being exposed to those kind of environments. But a big thing I really find is that initially, even in school, the commercial trucks are very intimidating. It's a very large sensory overload. If you're working with a manual truck, you're having to, you're gonna be double clutching. Not everybody starts out as a floater and can skip gears. I mean, that's something you can easily learn and someone can teach you if they have the right knowledge. But when first being trained and getting into commercial truck driving, the truck itself can be very overwhelming, and it kind of really just helps the more often you can actually get in the truck, whether you're driving or not, and familiarize yourself with the input controls, your signals, your lights, um, switches that control your differential, basically every small thing about the truck, the more natural it becomes and the less stressful it will be. And with time, the more often that you're actually out and on the road, the less stressful it will become. And once that's kind of the first hurdle when you come into truck driving, is getting over that sensory overload when you first initially get in the truck. At that point, you'll be able to better employ things like aim high, as far as your driving and how you visualize the space, because you have to get to a point where you can kind of roughly understand the speed of the vehicles moving around you, so you know when to start getting ready to pass and set things up. But it's also important at that point, once you've gotten to a comfort point with driving the truck, of knowing the warning signs of a stop coming up, and knowing that pretty much once you start seeing those signs, it doesn't matter if there's people behind you and they're rushing towards it. The second you recognize, like you see brake lights around a corner and you see stopped vehicles at a great distance, it doesn't matter how far away they are. The second you see that stuff, you should be backing out of your throttle. And um, it's kind of the reason also why having a CB radio is helpful, because sometimes if people are actually being considerate, they will call this stuff out long before you ever see it. So you'll know, but it's one of the most important things that I feel like you should understand, and it's very serious. When you see brake lights, pay very close attention no matter how far away they are. If you see more than one in a group, you don't understand that it's not like that's only a matter of seconds away. It's not 30 seconds away. It's you can see something a quarter, three-quarters of a mile away, and you will be on top of it before you can get a process thought through. So you have to get to a point where you're reflexively actually doing this stuff before you're even sure what's going on. And be intentional. Use your signals, especially if you already know and you can perceive that you're about to hit a hard stop. Put your four ways on and then go right into those brakes as fast as you can, as carefully as you can, and keep that steering wheel straight. It's just something that you are not going to understand being in training or in a truck driving school. You have to feel it for yourself, but you have to understand when you see brake lights in the distance and it's a large mass of vehicles, trucks, and everything else, even if you don't have a radio, understand that you should immediately be backing out of your throttle, putting on your retarder, whatever you have, and pay close attention to what's going on around you because there might be some fool behind you that didn't get the memo and he's going to come hauling ass up the side or like next to you or up the shoulder and go crashing into something. It has happened with me. So just keep your eyes about you whenever that kind of thing happens. You because stuff can happen behind you that you're not ready for. Um, it's also, I guess, in that regard, like if you're ever in an accident, you may feel like you can move, but it is very crucial that you be very careful with what you do because you can have spinal damage, and because you're in so much shock, you will not recognize that you have a severe injury, and you could possibly complicate things even more if you try to move in an actual accident scenario, especially in trucks. That's a lot of weight moving around. Um, yeah, it's just if you are ever in an accident of any kind and you've gone from going highway speeds to a dead stop, try to, as much as you safely can, not to move unless somebody has gotten to you and actually knows how to support a spinal injury or a back injury because it's not a joke. I've been a first responder and it's really not a joke. And some people will try to move, even in car accidents, and they end up shortening their lifespan because you couldn't be patient over a situation where you're full of adrenaline and kind of all over the place. I got way off topic there, so I apologize. Um, a big thing to understand is when you're working general OTR, you don't need to have a lot of specialized information when it comes to routes and locations. Um, Mostly, the only times that you really do need to know is when you're in the inner city. But to be fair, most of the central states, um, the Northwest and the Southwest, are very open, very broad grid type structures. It's only in places like where I work up in New York City, where if you don't have local knowledge, the signs and information that's on the signs and around the public areas will make absolutely no sense to you because without the context of things like snow height and regular truck routes, you will be running scared because it will look like there is 12.9, 12.8, 12.6, and all the local driver has to tell you is that's snow height. That number only applies when it's in that specific kind of inclement weather. So you just got yourself psyched out and you're like, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, I've got to get off the interstate. It's like, no, 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 no. If you're on the interstate, you're where you're supposed to be in places like New York City. It's once you get down to ground that it becomes complicated. But the nice thing about places like New York City is 511 actually has maps up there that can be incredibly helpful to you and show you basically all of the very real, very specific clearances. And another thing about that city in particular is that those clearances are by lane. They're not by they're not by the entire road. So it's very common to be on something like Flushing Avenue in New York City, and you will go down a specific area of it, and you'll have a clearance only on the right lane or the left. So that's also another thing. It's specific to that area, and it's something I'm very used to. Um, it is really important also if you ever have to go into the Northeast, do not plan your actual driving with limited hours. The worst thing you can do when going into places like Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and upstate New York, depending on where it is, that's mostly the east side of upstate, you have very limited access to parking everywhere up there, and most of it is paid. And in the case of New York, there's not a lot of safe places you can really be. If you park in certain parts of Flatbush and Queens, your truck will get vandalized. It will get spray painted. They will attempt to steal stuff off of it. That's kind of goes with the territory. That happens in Chicago as well. I mean, Yeah, I've worked the west side and the south side. Honestly, sometimes I'm still really more scared of Gary than anything else. But it's kind of a general. I don't know if I would say that working in the Northeast is actually on hard mode. Once you kind of get the gist and the rhythm of how everything works, it actually becomes second nature. And if you understand how traffic works there and like all along the 95 corridor, you can kind of actually work around it. And once you kind of get that rhythm, it takes a lot of the stress out of it. And if you're working with companies that know this, they're not going to push you hard for it unless they're stupid, in which case you shouldn't be working for them. There are a lot of really good dispatchers out there. There are good people that work at these companies. I just find that you have to be considerate of them. They are people too. I don't know why a lot of older truck drivers have a tendency to be incredibly toxic and disrespectful towards the service personnel that help them work, especially if you're like I am and you work under a semi-forced dispatch, which I'm not really under forced dispatch because I know enough about my loads, my locations, and my customers to really just negotiate with them. Okay, what do you want me to do at this location at this time? But be nice to your in general, if your dispatcher has not been disrespectful towards you or tried to pull a fast one on you, don't be rude to them because for the most part, they're pretty nice people. And I've always been considerate of all of my dispatchers and most of my operations staff. It really depends on if they're more concerned about protecting their equipment or protecting me. And for the most part, it's been about protecting me. So that's just something to keep in mind. Be respectful to people, be respectful to customers. A lot of stuff, it's unfortunate, again, like drivers taking out their frustrations from their workday and from dealing with their children and dealing with annoying people on you. Um, there's a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes with companies that is kind of stressful. And while you think that the dispatchers are getting paid mint, it's like, nope, it's probably their operations staff and their CFO and their safety director. Like, they're the people that work in dispatch get paid less than most of the drivers do. But granted, they're also able to go home all the time. I just that's an important thing to make your life a lot less stressful. But that being said, there are pretty bad companies out there. I would really have to ask some questions before I could give you clear answers. With me personally, like CRST was really hard to deal with back in the day when I was actually working for them because they just expected me to do things and I'm just a butt in a seat and they wanted me to go do this stuff and get paid essentially what was the equivalent wage of $8 an hour because I wasn't teaming. But I wasn't teaming because I couldn't find a co-driver. And I left that company literally within like a month because I went through my training period and just left. So, unless you're fortunate enough to work for like Malone, which was one of their flatbed divisions, it's like you're kind of screwed. And there's a lot of things like that that are kind of going on. If you end up signing on with a megacorp like Schneider, JB Hunt, Swift, Night Transportation, um, it's just you very much are going to be a number. Um, and as far as the corporate structure, they don't care. If you damage their equipment, they fire you. So it's kind of important that if you work in a local dispatch and in a local job, just be good to your dispatchers because a little bit of consideration can count for a lot of people defending you when stuff goes wrong. And it has saved my ass on several occasions just being considerate to my dispatcher. So it's it's something worth noting. Um, I guess the other thing is come into this job understanding if you have mental health issues, if you have psychological problems, if you're lonely, if you have depression, stay away from OTR work. Stay close to your family, stay close to your support base because this job can be very isolating, very lonely, um, very stress inducing and uncomfortable. You'll find a lot of occasions where you don't get a chance to get a shower or really take care of yourself or even brush your teeth some days because you don't have water with you or because you can't get near a bathroom. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong that can make you just feel completely gross, nasty, and disgusting, and that everybody's just looking at you like a freaking ogre. And you'll feel like the scum of the earth some days, and people will just mistreat you and talk to you negatively or just be inconsiderate. So I would come into this very much understanding that it can really take a toll on your health and your mental health. Like there's way too much that can go wrong in this job, and there's a lot of stress no matter what you do, and you need to be aware of that going in. It's not something, mental health is not something that is really talked about in driving school. Mental health is really something people don't even really consider talk about. And again, people consider it not masculine to talk about mental health in the trucking industry. Well, I don't fucking care. I've dealt with that isolation myself. I've dealt with that distance. I've dealt with the job interrupting my family life and being able to see my kids and those kind of things. It happens. And if you're not ready for that, it really can come back to bite you. And it's something you really need to think about and consider before you take this job. Now, on the positives, if you work OTR and you're someone that has wanderlust and loves going places, it can be a wonderful thing and a wonderful experience for you. You will get to see places that you never thought you'd be able to. You'll be able to essentially work on your own timetable, sleep when you need to, work when you need to. Um, you like for some people, this will be the best paying job that they've ever had. And depending on where you are, general OTR and, corporate driving can pay anywhere, depending on how hard you work. It can pay anywhere from $35,000 to $70,000 a year. More specialized things like hazardous materials and LTL, if you have a good company with good benefits, can easily make you anywhere from $80,000 to $90,000 a year. And that's profit. That's not you paying for other stuff. I really would warn, honestly, to not go into lease operations or owner operations until you've had some time to get your life in order, get used to the job, and get a sense of your finances because one, there's a lot of shady practices when it comes to lease operations when you join these corporate companies, and there's a lot more responsibility that isn't spoken about. Your single largest expenditure for doing this job is going to be fuel. And considering that depending on how hard you're running with the amount of weight, you could be paying anywhere from $400 to $600 a day, multiple times a week, to keep your truck fueled up. And then there's equipment failure costs that can cost more than a brand new car on these trucks. So there's considerations to be made about the financial aspects about it, the mechanical aspects about it, and it's just something that don't let some recruiter or some dispatcher or some operations manager butter you up with big numbers because there are people out there that earn six digits a year working as an owner operator, but their actual profits are under 15% of that. Like they make less than a corporate driver after you factor in all the expenses of repairs, fuel, insurance, and all of that afterwards. Now, I cannot speak from true experience on that because I remained mostly a corporate driver because of my family and my financial obligations. I am not trying to overextend myself, and I know that I'm not capable of actually leasing, paying for, making truck payments, and everything else on top of my family's financial responsibilities. I mean, I'm just being realistic in that regard. But that is just a fair warning. If you're new to the industry, do not go to lease operations. Don't make that your first thing. And I am not joking. Companies like Prime, Swift, Knight, CR England, the big corporate companies will try to get you into those lease operation jobs, and you can get royally screwed, as in situations where they're literally leasing out your unit to multiple people at a time. So it's just a fair word of warning to be careful with those kind of things. I guess at the end of the day, I feel like another important aspect is personal health. It is actually really easy to be healthy while driving, both through just your food choices, but as well as fasting, exercise. There are easy ways to exercise while working in this kind of environment. There are ways to kind of work with it, and especially when you're in a full size truck, you have plenty of room to stretch out. You could easily put like a pull up bar and even get like collapsible um, ellipticals and things that you can easily pack away when you're driving. So there are a lot of options to take good care of yourself out here, but it takes motivation and it takes some focus to actually, commit to it. And that's actually hard to come by because depending on what you're doing, your schedule can be quite irregular. You might be working days, you might be working nights, but it is definitely possible to actually take good care of yourself. And I think a big problem we have as truck drivers is forgetting to hydrate. Like seriously, I'd rather have to be peeing every 2 hours and stopping to go to the bathroom than deal with the brain fog, the very advanced fatigue that comes with it. Um, just cognitive impairments that come from dehydration that people don't think about very often. So take care of yourself. Like, you're worth it. Like, actually take care of yourself and keep in contact with your friends and your family and make sure that you're actually, having a life outside of this industry because it is very isolating, and be very stressful and very lonely. So, like I said, take care of yourself. I hope this kind of gives you a little bit of an idea kind of what goes on in this industry and kind of gives you a realistic expectation of what you're walking into. And I hope that you actually find some success here, even if you don't spend the rest of your life doing this. I just hope that you don't get yourself into trouble or get into a financial situation that makes your life a living hell. But with that, I hope you have a good day. Thanks.